What if that nagging feeling in the back of your neck was real? What if those hands reaching out from the dark that you believed were there were there? What if the monster in the basement really existed? And what if there was really something under the bed? Would you have the courage to face your fears?
Part 1. The Long Haul. The CB radio had been dead for the last 3 hours. Even the emergency channels were silent, which was unusual for the ice road between Yellowknife and the mine. I'd been making this run for 15 years, and the silence made my skin crawl more than the constant cracking of the ice beneath my 18 wheels. Breaker 19, this is Robert. Anybody out there? I called into the mic for the 100th time. Nothing but static answered back. The dashboard clock read 6:43 a.m., and the sun was just starting to peek over the horizon, casting an eerie red glow across the frozen landscape. I'd left Yellowknife around midnight, with a full load of mining equipment, and something had felt off right from the start. The usual crowd at Mike's truck stop had been thin, and those who were there kept glancing at their phones with worried looks. I adjusted my seat, feeling the familiar ache in my lower back. The thermos of coffee beside me had gone cold hours ago, but I took a swig anyway. That's when I saw it. A overturned pickup truck about half a mile ahead, smoke still rising from its hood. Ah, hell, I muttered, slowly applying the brakes. You can't stop suddenly on the ice road unless you want to end up taking an unexpected swim in the Arctic waters below. As I got closer, I could see someone moving around the wreck. The figure was stumbling in an odd way, like they were drunk or hurt. I brought my rig to a complete stop about 50 yards from the accident. Protocol said I needed to help, but something in my gut told me to stay put. I grabbed my emergency kit and my Remington 870 shotgun I kept secured behind the seat. You never know what kind of wildlife you might run into up here. Hey! I called out, stepping down from the cab. You all right over there? The figure turned, and even in the dim morning light, I could tell something was very wrong. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, and as they started walking toward me, I noticed their neck was bent at an impossible angle. That's when my phone buzzed, the first signal I'd had in hours. A string of emergency alerts lit up the screen. Emergency alert. Shelter in place. Emergency alert. Avoid all contact with infected individuals. Emergency alert. Martial law declared in Northwest Territories. The figure was getting closer now, and I could hear a wet, gurgling sound coming from its throat. In the growing light, I could see that half its face was missing, yet somehow it was still moving, still coming toward me with single-minded purpose. I backed up toward my truck, gripping the baseball bat tighter. Stay back! I shouted, but it kept coming. That's when I heard more sounds. Similar gurgling noises coming from the trees on both sides of the road. More figures emerged, all moving with that same unnatural gait. I made a split-second decision. The shotgun roared in my hands, the blast taking the first figure's head clean off. It collapsed, but the others were closing in. The sound had drawn even more of them. I sprinted back to my rig, slamming the door just as rotting hands started pounding on the side. With trembling fingers, I fired up the engine. The creatures, I couldn't think of them as people anymore, were trying to climb up to my cab now. I threw the truck into gear and pushed forward, feeling bumps under my wheels that I tried hard not to think about. My hands were shaking on the wheel as I picked up speed, leaving the horror behind me. But I knew this was just the beginning. I had 11 more hours of daylight left, a full tank of diesel, and 300 miles of ice road ahead of me. The world had changed in the span of a single haul, and I had a feeling the rules of survival had changed with it. Up ahead, I could see more disabled vehicles dotting the ice road, and more dark figures moving in the growing light. I reached for my CB radio one more time. Breaker 19, this is Robert. If anybody's out there, they're not human anymore. Stay off the ground. Stay in your rigs. And for God's sake, stay alive. Only static answered back as I pressed down on the accelerator, my truck cutting through the Arctic morning like a ghost ship on a frozen sea. Part 2. No safe harbor. The mine was still 4 hours away when I saw the flames. Black smoke billowed up ahead, and as I got closer, I could make out what looked like a jackknifed fuel tanker blocking most of the ice road. The cab was crushed, and fire was spreading across the ice in growing pools of burning diesel. "Damn it, Jerry," I muttered, recognizing the distinctive red and silver paint job of my friend's rig. Jerry had left Yellowknife 6 hours before me with a full load of fuel for the mine. I grabbed my binoculars from the dash and scanned the wreck. No movement around the truck, but the fire was creating dangerous hotspots on the ice. Already I could see stress fractures spreading like spider webs across the surface. This section of the road wouldn't hold much longer. The CB crackled to life, making me jump. "Help! Anyone! Checkpoint Delta is... they're everywhere." The voice was unfamiliar, breaking up badly. I keyed the mic. "This is Robert, copy. Where are you? Over. Don't come to Delta. They've got Sarah. Oh God, they're breaking through the..." The transmission cut off in a burst of static and what sounded like screaming. Checkpoint Delta was a small way station about 10 miles ahead, one of the few places to fuel up and rest along the ice road. Sarah was the day manager there. Sweet lady. Always had fresh coffee brewing and homemade cookies for the drivers. I checked my shotgun shells. Only 6 left. The rest of my ammo was in my personal truck back in Yellowknife. Nobody ever expected to need more than a couple of shells for scaring off wildlife. The ice groaned beneath my truck, the sound amplified by the water below. The fire from Jerry's tanker was spreading faster now, and I had to make a choice. Try to find a way around on the ice that might not hold, or attempt to use one of the maintenance tracks through the woods that connected to the main road about 20 miles up. My headlights caught movement in the trees. More of those things were shambling out of the forest, drawn by the fire and noise. They moved faster than the others I'd seen, maybe because they were fresher. I didn't want to think about what that meant. I grabbed my map and traced the maintenance route with my finger. It was meant for lighter vehicles, but my rig could probably handle it if I took it slow. The alternative was trying to cross ice that was rapidly deteriorating from the heat of the burning fuel. The decision was made for me when I heard the first crack. A sound like a gunshot across the ice. A spiderweb of fissures spread out from under the burning tanker. I threw the truck into reverse just as the ice gave way, Jerry's rig slowly disappearing into the black water, along with a dozen of the infected that had gotten too close. I backed up a quarter mile before I found the turnoff for the maintenance track. The path was narrow, barely wider than my truck, with trees pressing in on both sides. Perfect place for an ambush, but I was out of options. "Sorry about the cargo," I said to nobody in particular, as I guided my rig onto the snow-packed trail. The mining equipment I was hauling would have to wait. Right now, I just needed to find somewhere safe to hole up and figure out what the hell was happening to the world. The CB crackled again. This time, I could hear music in the background. "Don't fear the Reaper of all things." And a laughing voice came through clear as day. "Attention all drivers. This is Mark broadcasting from the high tower at the Thompson mine. We've got power, we've got walls, and we've got guns. If you can make it here, we'll take you in. But you better hurry. When the sun sets, these bastards get real angry. Over." The high tower. The mine's central control building. 5 stories of concrete and steel built to withstand Arctic storms. It was still 3 hours away, assuming I could get back to the main road. I checked my fuel gauge, 3/4 full. The sun was climbing higher, but in these parts, winter days were short. I had maybe 8 hours of daylight left. The trees scraped against my cab like skeletal fingers as I pushed deeper into the forest. In my mirrors, I could still see the smoke from Jerry's truck rising into the pale morning sky, a beacon drawing more of the dead to the ice road I'd left behind. Somewhere ahead was safety. But first, I had to make it through the woods. Part 3. Through the trees. The maintenance track was worse than I'd imagined. Frozen ruts caught my tires, threatening to pull the rig off course with every turn. The trees pressed in so close I could hear branches scraping paint off my trailer. But that wasn't what worried me most. It was the footprints in the snow. They were everywhere, crossing and crisscrossing the path. Some looked human enough, but others. The stride was too long, the impression too deep, like whatever made them was dragging itself forward on broken legs. The CB radio kept picking up fragments of conversations, desperate voices calling for help, coordinates of safe zones that probably weren't safe anymore. And once, a child crying for their mother. I had to turn it down. There wasn't anything I could do for them anyway. That's when I saw the SUV. A red Ford Explorer, nose first in a snowbank. Driver's side door wide open. Fresh tracks led from the vehicle into the woods, along with dark spots in the snow that I told myself weren't blood. I was about to pass it by when I caught movement through the Explorer's back window. Someone was still inside. They weren't moving like the infected. More like they were trying to stay low, stay hidden. Damn it, I muttered, bringing the truck to a stop. I couldn't just leave someone behind, not out here. Besides, I needed directions to get back to the main road. My GPS had stopped working an hour ago. I grabbed the shotgun and climbed down, every crunch of snow under my boots sounding too loud in the winter silence. "Hello?" I called out, keeping my voice low. "I'm here to help. I'm not infected." A face appeared in the window. A woman, maybe mid-30s, pressing a finger to her lips in a desperate gesture for silence. Behind her, I could see a young boy. Couldn't have been more than 10. That's when I heard it. A wet, raspy breathing coming from the trees. The woman's eyes went wide with terror, looking at something behind me. I spun around, bringing up the Remington. 3 of them emerged from the tree line. They wore mining company coveralls, faces black with frostbite, limbs bent at unnatural angles. The name tags were still visible. Pete, Miguel, and Chris. Men I'd probably hauled supplies to just last week. The shotgun roared, taking Pete's head off at the shoulders. Miguel lunged forward with impossible speed. They were definitely getting faster. I pumped the shotgun and fired again, the blast catching Miguel in the chest. He stumbled but kept coming. "Run!" I shouted to the woman and boy. "My truck! Get in my truck!" Chris was circling around, trying to flank me. I could hear more of them coming through the trees, drawn by the gunshots. Miguel was almost on me, his frozen hands reaching for my throat. The 3rd shell took him down, but now I only had 3 rounds left. The woman and boy sprinted past me toward the idling truck. Chris lunged for the boy, but I swung the shotgun like a club, catching him in the temple. It bought enough time for them to reach the passenger side. More infected appeared from the trees, at least a dozen. I backed toward my rig, firing 1 more round into the closest cluster. 2 went down, but the others kept coming. The sound was drawing more of them. I reached the cab and pulled myself up, slamming the door just as rotting hands started pounding on the glass. The woman and boy were huddled in the passenger seat, both shaking with cold and fear. "I'm Robert," I said, throwing the truck into gear. "Hold on tight." "Lisa," the woman managed between chattering teeth. "This is Tommy. We were trying to reach my sister in Yellowknife." I didn't have the heart to tell her Yellowknife probably wasn't safe anymore. "There's a safe zone at Thompson Mine," I said instead, wrestling with the wheel as the truck plowed through the snow. "That's where we're headed." "They're following us," Tommy whispered, looking out the back window. The kid was right. I could see them in my mirrors, running now, actually running through the deep snow. "They'll never catch up," I assured him, but I wasn't so certain. The maintenance track was getting narrower, the turns tighter. The rig wasn't built for this kind of terrain. Lisa pointed through the windshield. "Look!" Up ahead, through a gap in the trees, I could see the main ice road. We were almost there. Just another quarter-mile through the forest. That's when the engine made a sound no driver ever wants to hear. A sharp bang followed by a high-pitched whine. Black smoke started pouring from under the hood. "No, no, no," I muttered, watching the temperature gauge spike into the red. "Not now. Please, not now." The infected were getting closer. The truck was dying, and the sun had just disappeared behind a bank of heavy snow clouds. Part 4. The Long Night. The engine coughed again, spewing more black smoke. We were maybe 200 yards from the main road, but the grade was steep and the snow was deep. Even if the engine held, I wasn't sure we had enough momentum to make it. "There's a thermal blanket in the emergency kit behind the seat," I told Lisa. "Get it around Tommy." The temperature was dropping fast with the setting sun, and the cab would get cold quick if we lost power. I had 2 shells left in the shotgun and a dying truck. Behind us, the infected were closing the gap, moving faster than anything dead had a right to. The first flakes of snow began to fall. "Robert," Lisa's voice was steady despite her fear. "What's plan B?" I checked the mirrors again. At least 20 infected now, with more shapes moving through the trees. The closest ones were only 50 yards back, and these weren't shambling like the others. They were running full tilt, frost-blackened faces twisted in hunger. "We need to unhook the trailer," I said, already reaching for the brake controls. "It's too heavy. Maybe without it." The engine made a sound like a dying animal, and thick white steam started mixing with the black smoke. The temperature gauge was pegged all the way right. "Hold on!" I shouted, yanking the trailer brake. The massive rig shuddered as the trailer locked up, skidding in the snow. I pulled the release lever, and with a thunderous clang, the trailer detached. The cab lurched forward, suddenly lighter. For a moment, I thought it would work. The engine roared, and we started climbing faster. Then came a sound like a rifle shot from under the hood, and all power died. "Out! Now!" I grabbed the shotgun and threw open my door. "Run for the road!" Lisa pulled Tommy from the cab. The infected were almost on us, their rasping breath audible over the howling wind. The snow was falling harder now, cutting visibility to almost nothing. I fired one of my last shells into the closest group. 3 went down, but the others just climbed over them, never slowing. Lisa and Tommy were running through knee-deep snow, making for the road. I followed, trying to keep myself between them and the horde. That's when I heard it. The distinctive rumble of a diesel engine. A pair of headlights cut through the snow up on the main road. "Help!" Lisa screamed, waving her arms. "Down here!" The vehicle stopped. Through the swirling snow, I could make out the shape of a massive snowplow, its blade raised high. A spotlight swung in our direction, illuminating the scene. "Holy shit!" a voice called from the plow. "Ted, get the rifle. We got live ones." The infected were 20 yards behind us now. I fired my last shell, more to slow them than anything else. We were almost to the road, but the slope here was nearly vertical. Lisa and Tommy were struggling to climb in the deep snow. A rope ladder unfurled from the top of the snowplow. "Grab on!" someone shouted. "Quick!" Lisa pushed Tommy toward the ladder. "Climb, baby! Climb now!" The boys scrambled up as rifle fire erupted from above. The infected were picking up speed, unnaturally fast in the deepening snow. I could see their faces clearly now. People I knew. Drivers I'd shared coffee with at checkpoint stations. All twisted into something inhuman. Lisa went up next. I turned to hold them off, swinging the empty shotgun like a club, catching the nearest one in the face. Hands grabbed at my coat, tearing, pulling. The cold hit me like a physical blow where they ripped the fabric. "Jump!" Lisa screamed. "Robert, jump!" I leaped for the ladder, catching it with one hand. Below me, the infected swarmed, creating a writhing mass of bodies. They started climbing over each other, building a pyramid of frozen flesh, reaching for my legs. The plow started moving, dragging me away from their grasping hands. I pulled myself up rung by rung, my fingers numb with cold. Just as I reached the top, one of them caught my boot. I kicked hard, feeling the boot come loose. Better to lose it than my foot. Hands grabbed my coat, pulling me onto the roof of the plow. I collapsed, gasping for breath in the frigid air. "I'm Ted," said the man with the rifle, still picking off infected with careful shots. That's Frank driving. We're with the mine rescue team. Thompson Mine? I asked, pulling Lisa and Tommy close as Frank tossed us heavy blankets. No. Ted's voice was grim. Thompson's gone. Overrun 2 hours ago. We heard the broadcast, too. Got there just in time to see it fall. We're heading for the old Parker mine. It's abandoned, but the deep shaft's got supplies and generators. Better defensible position. I looked back through the snow at my abandoned truck, already becoming a dark shape in the growing storm. Everything I owned was in that rig, but none of it mattered now. How far to Parker? I asked, watching more shapes emerge from the forest below. 3 hours, Frank called from the cab. If we're lucky. Storm's getting worse. The wind picked up, driving the snow horizontally now. Somewhere in the darkness, I could hear more of them coming, their cries carried on the Arctic wind. We huddled under the blankets as the plow pushed on through the gathering darkness, each of us lost in thoughts of what we'd lost, and what horrors the night might still bring. Part 5. The Deep Dark. The storm turned into a full-blown blizzard within the hour. We were forced down into the cab of the plow, too dangerous to stay on the roof with the wind chill dropping below -60. Tommy had stopped shivering, which worried me. I remembered my winter survival training. When they stop shivering, that's when you really need to worry. Here, Ted passed back a thermos. Coffee's old, but it's hot. Frank was hunched over the wheel, barely able to see 20 feet ahead, even with the plow's powerful lights. The infected were still out there. We could see them occasionally, dark shapes in the swirling snow. But the storm seemed to be slowing them down at last. 2 hours to Parker, Frank announced, checking his watch. Maybe more in this weather. That's when we hit something. The plow lurched hard right, then left. Frank wrestled with the wheel as we slid toward the edge of the road. Ice fracture! He shouted. Hold on! The whole road was splitting beneath us. I could hear the ice cracking, that distinctive sound like gunshots in the dark. Frank tried to back up, but it was too late. The road tilted, and suddenly we were sliding. The plow's front end dropped, pointing down into blackness. Through the windshield I could see open water below, black and deadly cold. We were balanced on the edge, the back wheels still on solid ice, the engine screaming as Frank tried to reverse. Everyone out the back! Now! Ted was already moving, pulling Tommy with him. The weight's making it worse! Lisa scrambled after them. I was halfway out when I heard Frank curse. He was still fighting the wheel, but his seatbelt was jammed. Go! He shouted at me. I'll get it! I ignored him, pulling my knife from my belt and sawing at the belt. The plow slipped another few inches. Water started spraying up onto the windshield. The belt finally gave way. I grabbed Frank's coat and pulled just as the plow's front end went under. We tumbled out the back door into the snow. The sound of the ice road collapsing was deafening, like the whole world was breaking apart. We lay there in the snow, watching our only transportation disappear into the frigid water. The storm raged around us, and somewhere in the darkness, I could hear them coming. Parker Mine, Ted shouted over the wind. It's about 5 miles east. We go on foot. Tommy can't walk that far, Lisa said, holding the boy close. His lips were turning blue. I looked around, desperate for options. That's when I saw it. A pair of headlights through the snow, moving fast. For a moment I thought it was more infected, but then I heard the distinctive sound of a diesel engine. A massive mining truck burst through the storm wall, its 10-foot tires throwing up sheets of snow. It slid to a stop near us, and a familiar voice called down from the cab. Need a ride? It was Mark, the same voice from the radio at Thompson Mine. Sorry about the false broadcast. Had to draw them away while we evacuated the survivors. Parker's waiting for us. They've got the deep shaft fortified and stocked. Been planning for something like this for years, believe it or not. We climbed up the ladder to the cab. It was warm inside, and more importantly, high enough off the ground that nothing could reach us. Through the back window, I could see dozens of infected emerging from the storm. but they couldn't climb the massive tires. The whole territory's falling, Mark explained as we got moving again. But Parker we can hold. The shaft goes down 2 miles. Generators, food stores, medical supplies. Previous owner was a doomsday prepper. Thought we were crazy maintaining it all these years. Tommy was already warming up, color returning to his face. Lisa held him close, tears freezing on her cheeks. Ted and Frank were checking their weapons, and I was thinking about my shotgun, lost somewhere in the dark water behind us. "I've got spare guns at Parker," Mark said, reading my mind. "Going to need every shooter we can get. They're evolving, learning, getting faster, stronger." "But we'll be ready," I said, watching the storm rage outside. My first 12 hours of the apocalypse were almost up, but somehow I knew the real fight was just beginning. The mining truck pushed on through the darkness, its powerful engine drowning out the sounds of the infected below. Ahead, barely visible through the snow, I could see lights burning in the distance. Parker Mine, our fortress in the frozen wasteland. We'd survived the first day. Now we just had to survive all the days that followed. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that story as much as I did. Come back next time for some more scary stories. And as always, remember to face your fears.